Let's talk about what it actually means when a man prioritizes your pleasure over his own. Because that shift, subtle as it may seem on the surface, is a deep signal that something fundamental has changed inside him. We're not talking about performance or technique here. We're talking about intent, about presence, about how a man begins to experience you not as an object of desire, but as a partner in a shared emotional, physical, and even spiritual experience. When a man is emotionally detached or only partially invested, sex often becomes a transaction. The focus is on release, on validation, on proving something to himself, to you, maybe even to some imagined scoreboard of masculinity. But when he's deeply in, that instinct begins to dissolve. What emerges instead is a capacity for attunement. He pays attention, not just to your body, but to your breath, your tension, your stillness, your rhythm. It's no longer about getting somewhere. It's about being with you in the moment, fully, without needing to dominate it. This is the shift from self to shared, and that's not small, because for many men, especially in a culture that teaches them to be performative in the bedroom, to associate worth with performance, prioritizing another's experience requires emotional courage. It means softening, it means letting go of ego, and ironically, it's when the ego dissolves that genuine erotic generosity begins. He'll start to notice things he never noticed before. The way your body responds to touch that isn't goal-oriented. The way your desire deepens when you feel emotionally secure. He starts asking, not with words, but with the way he touches you. What do you need from me right now? It's no longer just about climax. It's about communion. That's not weakness. That's emotional presence. That's a man who has grown past the need to conquer and into the desire to connect. And when that happens, you'll feel it. He'll slow down, not out of passivity, but out of intention. He'll learn patience, not as a technique, but as a form of respect. There will be more silence, but not the awkward kind, the kind that says, I'm here with you. I'm not rushing this. You matter. You really matter. The kind that says, I'm here with you. I'm not rushing this. You matter. You live in a secure world, and at the same time, you make yourself meaningful by being insipid. The kind that says, I'm here with you, and I promise you will not be disappointed. You will not. And when a man makes you feel like you matter during sex, what he's really saying is, this is no longer about just me, it's about us. In this state, your pleasure becomes his mirror. It's not a chore, not a checkbox, but a reflection of how safe he's made you feel, how much trust you've built, and how much love, whether spoken or not, is present between you. That's why men who are deeply in often find themselves more emotionally moved by your satisfaction than by their own. It's not that they don't care about their experience, they do, but they understand that pleasure shared is amplified, that mutuality is more erotic than domination, that generosity, real generosity, is sexy. So no, it's not just about him trying harder in bed, it's about him being more in bed, more present, more vulnerable, more committed to the moment than to the performance. And that presence is the real giveaway. Because when a man is deeply in, he no longer sees sex as a destination. He sees it as a dialogue. And in that dialogue, your pleasure becomes his poetry. Because when a man is truly in love, your fulfillment isn't just part of the experience, it is the experience. There's a distinct difference between having sex and making love. And most people think they understand it, but when a man is deeply in, the difference becomes undeniable. It's not about softness or slowness or even romance. It's about emotional presence. It's about the energy that enters the room before anything physical even happens. Because when a man is truly connected, sex stops being a physical act and becomes a form of expression, an extension of what he feels but may not always know how to say. We live in a world that trains men to separate emotion from arousal. They are told from a young age that sex is about conquest, control, ego, even escape. The erotic becomes performative. And for many, it stays that way. But something radical happens when a man falls, truly falls, for someone. He doesn't just desire her body, he desires her being. The experience becomes infused with intention. It's no longer about how much he can get or how well he can perform. It becomes a way to connect, not to escape life, but to step deeper into it, through her. When that shift takes place, you'll notice it in how he touches you. There's a difference between a hand that's hungry and a hand that's curious. One is seeking satisfaction, the other is seeking truth. When a man is making love, his touch becomes a question. Can I meet you here? And he listens, not with his ears, but with his whole body, with the way he adjusts to your energy, with the way he breathes with you, not over you, with the way he holds eye contact, not to dominate, but to see. In that space, physicality becomes a language. The tension, the pacing, the rhythm, it all reflects what's happening emotionally. And here's the thing. When a man is deeply in, he doesn't need the act of sex to prove anything. He doesn't need intensity for validation, because making love isn't about release, it's about reverence. It's an act of emotional exposure. And for many men, that's terrifying. It's raw, it's real, it means letting go of the armor they've spent a lifetime building. But when they do, that's when everything changes. The performance fades, the anxiety dissolves, and what takes its place is presence. A man who's making love isn't trying to be something. He's simply being with you in the moment. That's why you'll feel more held, more seen, more safe. Not because of what he's doing, but because of why he's doing it. The motivation behind the movement becomes more meaningful than the act itself. And it doesn't end when it's over. That's one of the most revealing parts. When a man is making love, the after is just as sacred as the during. He doesn't pull away, he stays close. He might hold you longer, say less, but somehow say more. There's a kind of stillness, a quiet, that speaks louder than words. It's as if the experience needs no explanation. You were both there, you both felt it. And that's the mark of real intimacy. Not how much you did, but how deeply you were. Because when a man is deeply in, sex becomes less about proving he desires you, and more about proving he's with you, fully, honestly, and without mask. Making love isn't about intensity, it's about integrity. One of the most overlooked signs that a man is deeply in is not how dominant he becomes, but how vulnerable he allows himself to be. And that vulnerability shows up most clearly in the bedroom, not because sex is inherently emotional, but because it strips us down to our most unguarded state, literally and metaphorically. And for many men, this kind of exposure is foreign territory, because the way masculinity is traditionally wired, intimacy has been paired with performance, not with emotional presence. But when a man is in love, truly in, it's no longer sustainable to keep the armor on. He may have learned how to be desired. He may have learned how to satisfy. But what he hasn't always learned is how to be seen. And this is the paradox. For a man to give fully in intimacy, he has to be willing to risk being known, to let you see the parts he usually hides, even from himself. This can show up in very subtle ways. the way he exhales more deeply when you touch him, not out of arousal, but out of relief. The way he lets silence linger after a kiss, not because he's unsure, but because he's present. Or maybe it's the moment he whispers something he's never said out loud before. Something fragile, maybe even a little broken. And he says it not to impress, but to reveal, to let you in, not just into his body, but into his truth. You see, many men are used to performing in bed, performing strength, performing desire, even performing closeness. But when he feels deeply connected to you, the script falls apart. And what emerges instead is honesty, not always polished, not always confident, but real. A man who is deeply in may not always know how to express it verbally, but his vulnerability will speak through his stillness, through his tenderness, through the moments where he doesn't hide his uncertainty. This is why emotional safety matters more than most people realize. A man won't drop his guard unless he feels that it's safe to do so. And when he finally does, when he stops managing your perception of him and simply is, that's when true intimacy begins. Because there's a rawness in those moments that no amount of technique can manufacture. The way he looks at you like you could either destroy him or heal him. The way his body language softens. The way he might tremble, not out of fear, but out of depth. And yes, it can be scary for him. Vulnerability often is. But when he's deeply in, fear no longer has the final say. Love does. Presence does. Yes, and he starts to experience the bedroom not as a stage, but as a sanctuary, a place where masks aren't needed, where performance becomes presence, and where sex becomes more than an act, it becomes a window into the soul. So if you ever find yourself in a moment where he's no longer trying to impress you, but instead trying to meet you emotionally and spiritually, you're witnessing something rare. You're witnessing a man choosing truth over ego. That is not weakness. That is a man who is strong enough to be soft. When a man is deeply in, intimacy is no longer confined to the physical act. It begins long before the bedroom and lingers long after. That's the key difference most people miss. For a man who's emotionally connected, sex isn't a standalone event. It's part of a larger emotional ecosystem. It's woven into how he looks at you when you're laughing, how he touches you while you're cooking, how he listens when you're venting. That emotional attunement doesn't suddenly switch on behind closed doors. It's built in every moment that leads up to it. This is what many don't understand about men in love. Their arousal doesn't just come from visual stimulation or physical tension. It comes from emotional continuity. When he's invested, foreplay isn't something that happens 5 minutes before sex. It starts days earlier, in a text message that says, thinking of you, in how he notices when something's off, in how he stays close to you, even in silence, without needing to fix anything. That's what builds emotional trust. That's what makes your body feel safe enough to open, and your heart feels safe enough to soften. So when you finally do come together, you're not entering a new moment, you're continuing an ongoing one. And that's the defining mark of a man who's deeply in. He doesn't treat sex as a moment of escape. He treats it as a deepening of what already exists. His intimacy doesn't start with your body, it starts with your being. That's why his energy feels different. Why his presence feels less like pursuit and more like protection. Why being with him feels like being held, not handled. And this continues after the fact. This is where most people miss the mark. When the sex is over, is the connection still there? Does he reach for you, hold you, stay in the silence with you? Or does he turn away, roll over, check out? A man who's deeply in doesn't disappear in the aftermath. In fact, often, that's when he becomes most present, because the moments after are when real emotional closeness tends to surface, when words are fewer but emotions run deeper. In those quiet minutes, a man in love will often show you more than he could ever say. He'll rest his forehead on yours. He'll trace your skin, not out of desire, but reverence. He might not say anything at all, but he'll stay. That staying is everything, because in a world where people so often chase the high and vanish after the climax, a man who lingers is a man who's invested, not in what you can give, but in who you are. This also reveals something deeper about his relational maturity. Men who are only in it for the physical will compartmentalize sex, place it in a separate category from the rest of life. But when a man is emotionally attached, that wall breaks down. He doesn't separate the physical from the emotional because he doesn't separate you into parts. He sees you whole. And that changes everything about how he approaches intimacy. It's not about performance. It's not even about chemistry. It's about continuity, about carrying the thread of connection through every part of the day and letting that thread carry you both into the bedroom and beyond it. Because ultimately, when a man is deeply in, intimacy becomes a dialogue, not a transaction, a reflection of the emotional space you've created together rather than a moment stolen from it. He doesn't need an occasion to be close. He needs only your presence.